Okay, let's play some damn chess. With Uzi. God damn it.
Your brain is very good at most things.
Learn how to find brilliant
Logic
sacrifices
is not
to win
one of
its
its strong
style.
suits. Here are 6 problems that have broken thinkers for centuries, and some of them still aren't fully solved. Paradox 1. The ship of Theseus. A ship sails for
Sometimes you
100
need to
years.
sacrifice.
Every
Excellent.
plank
Check.
eventually rots and gets replaced.
Nice job sacrificing your
Nail.
What's
Piece by
sacrifice will let your
piece,
knight
until
fork
literally
between the
nothing
fleet
from the original ship remains. Is it still the same ship?
Forking time.
Most people say
Excellent.
yes.
Let's
It's
collect
the same ship.
Just well done. You sacrifice a piece to draw.
Now
away
imagine
from
someone collected
clear.
every single discarded original plank and rebuilt them, in the original configuration, into a second ship. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? The one that continuously existed, or the one made of the original material? Philosophers have debated this since ancient Greece. The original version comes from Plutarch, writing about the actual ship Athenians preserved and repaired for centuries as a monument to Theseus. There's still no agreed-upon answer, because the question isn't really about
Impressive sacrificial play. Winning
anything,
your rooks on the
including
7
you,
are
the
powerful,
same
but
thing over
can't get the job
time.
done.
Your body replaces the vast majority of its cells within about 7 to 10 years. Every company that's ever rebranded gradually, every sports team that's replaced every single player over a decade is running the exact same experiment. Nobody's ever
Yes,
settled.
one check leads to
Paradox 2.
Keep going.
The
This check makes
grandfather
The
paradox.
rooks harmonize
You
beautifully.
build a
with the
time
word
machine.
checkmate.
You
Great
track
job.
to a decade is a rebranded majority of its cells, including you, the answer. Because the question isn't really about ships. It's about what makes anything, including you, the same thing over time. Your body replaces the vast majority of its cells within about 7 to 10 years. Every company that's ever rebranded gradually, every sports team that's replaced every single player over a decade is running the exact same experiment. Nobody's ever settled it. Paradox 2. The grandfather paradox. You build a time machine. You travel to the past before your grandfather ever met your grandmother, and you accidentally prevent them from meeting. Your parent is never born. You are never born. But if you were never born, you couldn't have travelled back in time to prevent the meeting in the first place, which means your grandparents do meet, which means you are born, which means you do travel back and prevent it. It's a closed logical loop with no stable
God damn
answer.
it.
Physicists actually take this seriously. Some propose the Novikov's stable answer. Physicists actually take this seriously. Some propose the Novikov self-consistency principle, the idea that if backward time travel is physically possible, the universe would only ever allow histories that are logically consistent, meaning you could travel back, but something would always stop you from actually preventing the meeting. Others favour a many-world solution instead. You don't erase your own timeline, you simply create a new branching one where your grandparents never met, while the original branch and the original you continues on unaffected. Nobody can test either idea. It's one of the core reasons many physicists treat backward time travel as either impossible or only possible in ways that somehow prevent this exact contradiction from ever occurring. Paradox 3. The Sorites paradox. The heap. One grain of sand is not a heap. Add a second grain. Still not a heap. Each individual grain you add makes essentially no difference. And yet, at some point, undeniably, you do have a heap of sand. So where's the line? Add enough grains one at a time, and you can never point to the exact grain that turned not a heap into heap, because each step seems identical to the one before it. The Greek philosopher Eubulides is credited with first posing this roughly 2,400 years ago, and it's far more than a word game. Legal systems run directly into it. How many days of unpaid wages make something wage theft instead of a late payment? Medicine runs into it too. The diagnostic threshold for conditions like obesity or high blood pressure is a specific number that was chosen somewhat arbitrarily along a continuous scale where no single point is naturally correct. Vague categories built from precise individual steps that never quite add up cleanly. And someone, somewhere, still has to draw the line anyway. Paradox 4. The unexpected hanging paradox. A judge tells a prisoner, You will be hanged at noon on one weekday next week, and you will not know which day it is until the executioner arrives that morning. The prisoner reasons it out. It can't be Friday. If he's still alive by Thursday night, Friday would be the only day left, so he'd know in advance, which breaks the judge's rule. So Friday is eliminated. But then, by the same logic, it can't be Thursday either. If he survives through Wednesday, Thursday and Friday are both left, but Friday's already ruled out, so Thursday would be predictable too. Working backward, day by day, the prisoner logically proves the hanging can't happen at all, on any day of the week. Then, on a random Wednesday, the executioner shows up, and the prisoner is, genuinely, completely surprised. His airtight logic was somehow both correct and completely wrong. This paradox has a formal name, the epistemic surprise paradox, and it's been published on and argued over by working logicians since at least the 1940s. Some argue the flaw is in assuming the prisoner's own reasoning is common knowledge to himself in the way that others think the entire premise is subtly self-contradictory from the start. Mathematicians and philosophers still disagree about exactly which step of the reasoning breaks down. Paradox 5. Zeno's dichotomy paradox. You want to walk across a room. To get there, you first have to cross half the distance. The proof requires. Its full name, the epistic, was supposed on any day of the week. Then, on a random Wednesday, the executioner shows up, and the prisoner is, genuinely, completely surprised. His airtight logic was somehow both correct and completely wrong. This paradox has a formal name, the epistemic surprise paradox, and it's been published on and argued over by working logicians since at least the 1940s. Some argue the flaw is in assuming the prisoner's own reasoning is common knowledge to himself in the way the proof requires. Others think the entire premise is subtly self-contradictory from the start. Mathematicians and philosophers still disagree about exactly which step of the reasoning breaks down. Working backward, day by day, the prisoner logically proves the hanging can't happen at all. Thursday night, Friday would be the only day left, so he'd know in advance, which breaks the judge's rule. So Friday is eliminated. And someone, somewhere, still has to draw the line anyway. Paradox 4. The unexpected hanging paradox. A judge tells a prisoner, you will be hanged at noon on one weekday next week, and you will not know which day it is until the executioner arrives that morning. The prisoner reasons it out. It can't be Friday. If he's still alive by Thursday night, Friday would be the only day left, so he'd know in advance, which breaks the judge's rule. So Friday is eliminated. But then, by the same logic, it can't be Thursday either. If he survives through Wednesday, Thursday and Friday are both left, but Friday's already ruled out, so Thursday would be predictable too. Working backward, day by day, the prisoner logically proves the hanging can't happen at all, on any day of the week. Then, on a random Wednesday, the executioner shows up, and the prisoner is, genuinely, completely surprised. His airtight logic was somehow both correct and completely wrong. This paradox has a formal name, the epistemic surprise paradox, and it's been published on and argued over by working logicians since at least the 1940s. Some argue the flaw is in assuming the prisoner's own reasoning is common knowledge to himself in the way the proof requires. Others think the entire premise is subtly self-contradictory from the start. Mathematicians and philosophers still disagree about exactly which step of the reasoning breaks down. Paradox 5. Zeno's dichotomy paradox. You want to walk across a room. To get there, surprise paradox. And then, on a random Wednesday, can't happen. Working backward, day by day, the prisoner logically proves the hanging can't happen at all, on any day of the week. Then, on a random Wednesday, the executioner shows up, and the prisoner is, genuinely, completely surprised. His airtight logic was somehow both correct and completely wrong. This paradox has a formal name, the epistemic surprise paradox, and it's been published on and argued over by working logicians since at least the 1940s. Some argue the flaw is in assuming the prisoner's own reasoning is common knowledge to himself in the way the proof requires. Others think the entire premise is subtly self-contradictory from the start. Mathematicians and philosophers still disagree about exactly which step of the reasoning breaks down. Paradox 5. Zeno's dichotomy paradox. You want to walk across a room. To get there, you first have to cross half the distance. Then, half of what's remaining, then half of that, forever. An infinite number of steps, each one smaller than the last. Since you can never finish an infinite sequence of steps, what's remaining? There, Zeno's dichotomy paradox. You want to walk across a room. To get there, you first have to cross half the distance, then half of what's remaining, then half of that, forever. An infinite number of steps, each one smaller than the last. Since you can never finish an infinite sequence of steps, Zeno argued, motion itself should be logically impossible. And yet, you walk across rooms constantly. This one is technically solved using modern calculus. An infinite series of shrinking distances can still sum to a finite total, which is exactly how limits work. And it's the same mathematical idea underlying an infinite series of shrinking distances can still sum to a finite total, which is exactly how limits work. And it's the same mathematical idea underlying every velocity and acceleration calculation in modern physics and engineering. But it took roughly 2,000 years between Zeno posing the problem around 450 BCE and mathematicians like Newton and Leibniz having the formal tools to fully resolve it in the 1600s. Which says less about walking and more about how long a genuinely simple-sounding question can outrun the math needed to answer it properly. Paradox 6. The twin paradox. One twin stays on Earth. The other boards a spaceship traveling close to the speed of light, flies out, and comes back. Special relativity says the traveling twin ages slower than the one who stayed behind. A real, experimentally confirmed effect, not science fiction. In 1971, scientists flew atomic clocks around the world on commercial airliners and compared them to identical clocks that stayed on the ground. The flown clocks measured a tiny but precisely predicted amount less elapsed time. Here's the paradox. From the travelling twin's perspective, it's Earth that appears to be moving away at near light speed, and the stationary twin who should be aging slower. Each twin, by the same logic, should see the other one as the slow one. But when they reunite, only one of them is actually younger, the one who travelled. The resolution involves the travelling twin undergoing acceleration and deceleration. Turning around involves changing reference frames in a way the Earth-bound twin never does, which breaks the symmetry between their two perspectives, but explaining exactly why still trips up physics students today, more than a century after Einstein published the theory that produces it. 6 paradoxes. Some fully solved with real math behind them. Some still argued about by actual professional philosophers, right now in academic journals. So, if logic itself has holes this deep, you'd probably assume you'd notice when you fell into one. Let me know in the comments which of these 6 actually broke your brain the most.
Nobody's forcing you to subscribe, but if your brain enjoyed being broken today, it's probably going to keep happening, so you might as well hit the button now and save yourself the trip back.
With Uzi Emily.
In 1921, a woman named Amy Semple McPherson arrived in Los Angeles with nothing but a faith that moved mountains and a voice that would captivate millions.
Man, she smells like spit. Man,
She
she
had already
smells like
survived a
spit.
shipwreck, a devastating illness, and the loss of her first husband. By the time she settled in Southern California, she had learned that survival required not just belief, but a willingness to do something no evangelical preacher had ever done before. She
Come on,
decided to
slut.
broadcast her message on the radio. Radio was new then, experimental, barely trusted by the religious establishment. But Amy understood something fundamental about human nature that her peers did not. People craved connection, spiritual certainty, and the feeling of being personally seen and spoken to. When her voice first crackled through radio speakers in 1923, listeners experienced something almost miraculous. They could hear a preacher in their own homes, at their own time, without leaving their family or their farm. She wasn't confined to a pulpit in front of a few hundred people anymore. She had become a voice in the intimate space of millions of living rooms. This moment, this technological marriage of faith and mass communication, would birth an entirely new American religious phenomenon that would reshape Christianity, politics, money, and American culture itself for the next 100 years. It would create celebrities who lived like kings, who commanded the loyalty of millions, who wielded political influence that rivaled senators and governors. And eventually, it would expose the rotting core beneath the glittering facade, revealing scandals, fraud, manipulation, and despair. This is the story of America's televangelists, and how a movement built on promises of faith, health, and prosperity became synonymous with corruption,
I'm fixing to get
abuse,
myself
and
a
broken
four.
dreams. If you're watching this right now, I'm curious about something. Where are you from? And more importantly, have you ever attended a church where the pastor seemed more focused on what people could give than what they could receive? Have you ever felt uncomfortable by the prosperity gospel being preached from the pulpit? Leave a comment below and let me know. I want to hear your experiences because this story doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's lived and witnessed in real time by millions of people, and your perspective matters. Let's go back to Amy Semple McPherson first, because she deserves to be understood on her own terms before we see how she was followed and imitated and distorted by those who came after. Amy was born in 1890 in Ontario, Canada, to a Salvation Army family.
Spit.
Her mother was a Salvation Army officer, and Amy grew up understanding Christianity as an act of 1890 and unedited and distorted by those who came after. Amy was born in 1890 in Ontario.
With spit. With their spits.
Canada, to a Salvation Army family. Her mother was a Salvation Army officer.
With peanut.
And Amy grew up understanding Christianity as an active public faith. You didn't hide your beliefs in Amy's world. You demonstrated them, you sang about them, you lived them visibly. At 17, she experienced a religious conversion. Army officer, and Amy grew up understanding Christianity as an active. Her mother was a Salvation Army officer, and Amy grew up understanding Christianity as an active public faith. You didn't hide your beliefs in Amy's world. You demonstrated them, you sang about them, you lived them visibly. At 17, she experienced a religious conversion that she described as overwhelming, almost like being struck by lightning. She gave her life to what she called full-time Christian service, and married a Pentecostal missionary named Robert Semple. Together they went to China to do missionary work. Robert died of malaria within months. Amy was pregnant, alone in a foreign country, grieving. She returned to America with her infant daughter and eventually married again to a man named Harold McPherson.
Wow, look at those spit arms.
Married again.
With spit. With their spits, with pit bath arms, with pit bath arms, with pit bath arms.
To a man named Harold McPherson.
With spit.
This second marriage was a disaster. Harold didn't share her faith commitment, and by 1910, disaster. Married again to a man named Harold McPherson.
With spit. With spit. With spit.
This second marriage was a disaster. Harold didn't share her faith commitment, and by 1910, Amy had divorced him, a genuinely scandalous act for a respectable woman in that era. She was alone again, a divorced woman with 2 children, and the religious world that had raised her was prepared to reject her. But something remarkable happened instead. Amy refused to disappear. Instead, she decided to become an evangelist, a healing evangelist specifically, which meant she would travel the country claiming that God worked through her to heal the sick. She called herself the woman of the country, claiming that God worked through her to healing evangelist specifically.
With a spit person. Boo! I touched her head. He's touching her head.
Which meant she would travel the country claiming that God worked through her to heal the sick. She called herself the woman evangelist. Sometimes
with pit. That's a smelly Shelly. Suck my slut, dumbass. With Spitster Amy. With
Sister Amy. And
with spit.
she called herself the Woman Evangelist, sometimes Sister Amy.
With spit? That's a smelly Shelley.
And she developed a preaching style that was completely innovative for her time. While most preachers spoke in long, dry theological sentences, Amy told stories. She used humor. She employed props and costumes and theatrical elements. She understood instinctively that preaching was performance, and that the most compelling spiritual messages were the ones that made people feel something viscerally, not just intellectually. By 1920, when she arrived in Los Angeles, she was already famous in evangelical circles. But Los Angeles in 1920 was a booming, growing city full of transplants from all over America, many of them displaced, searching, spiritually hungry. Amy saw them, understood them, and she knew exactly what would reach them. She began holding tent meetings that grew bigger and bigger. Then, in 1923, she built the Angelus Temple, a 5,000, and she knew exactly what would reach hungry. Amy, many of them displaced, searching, spiritually hungry. Amy saw them, understood them, and she knew exactly what would reach them. She began holding tent meetings that grew bigger and bigger. Then, in 1923, she built the Angelus Temple, a 5,000-seat church that was revolutionary in its architecture and its mission. The Angelus Temple wasn't designed to look like a European cathedral with its stained glass and stone and verticality suggesting you were entering God's house. It was a theater that happened to have religious content. It had excellent acoustics for preaching, bright lights, an impressive stage, and seating arranged like a modern auditorium. It was built for a preacher to be seen and heard clearly by everyone, which was exactly what Amy understood she needed. What happened next was pure marketing genius wrapped in genuine spiritual conviction. Amy began broadcasting her sermons on radio from the Angelus Temple. She became one of the first preachers to understand radio as a medium that required a different performance style than preaching in person. She would modulate her voice, speak more conversation.
I'm fixing the ear, you're rook. That cut off your right ear.
Silence that worked perfectly over the radio waves.
Kiss that
She was
rook
warm.
goodbye.
She was
Kiss
accessible.
that rook goodbye.
And she spoke directly to the listeners' personal struggles. People began to feel like she was speaking to them individually. Letters poured in from across the country, from people who had never met her in person but felt like they knew her, like she understood their specific pain or their specific need. By the late 1920s, Amy Semple McPherson had become perhaps the most famous woman in America, certainly the most famous woman in American Christianity. The newspapers covered her activities like she was a movie woman in American Christianity. The newspapers covered her activities like she was a movie star.
Syrup, spit. Syrup, spit. 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 Spit.
When she mysteriously disappeared in 1926 and later turned up, claiming she had been kidnapped, it became the biggest news story of the year. The kidnapping story was almost certainly false. Later evidence suggested she had actually run away to meet a lover, but the scandal only increased her fame and her influence. Her followers didn't care about the scandal. They loved her, they trusted her, they believed she was truly a servant of God doing His work. And here's what's important to understand. For a time, Amy did do genuine good. She started hospitals, homeless shelters, food banks. She used her considerable income and influence to serve vulnerable people. She believed in healing, in divine intervention, in the supernatural power of God. She also believed that she deserved a good living for her work, that she should have nice clothes and beautiful homes, and the respect due to someone of her status. This wasn't unusual, but Amy understood something that most other preachers of her era didn't. She understood that in modern America, a preacher's power came increasingly from media access, not from theological authority or denominational position. Control the media, and you could build a ministry that didn't depend on church hierarchies or denominational approval. You could create something entirely new. Amy Semple McPherson died in 1944, and her legacy was genuinely mixed. She had pioneered electronic media evangelism. She had shown that a preacher could become a national figure and exercise enormous influence. She had also shown in her life story the dangerous combination of narcissism and genuine faith that could manifest when someone believes they are simultaneously a servant of God and a vessel of celebrity. After her death, her role was taken over by her son, Rolf McPherson, and the Angelus Temple continued. But the era of Amy as a singular phenomenon was over. What came next was something different. Something that would take the model Amy had created and distort it in ways she might not have fully anticipated. In the 1950s and 1960s, a new generation of evangelists emerged who had grown up watching Amy, learning from her example and thinking about how to take her methods even further. They had television now, which was more intimate than radio and also more visual, which meant you could reach people's emotions through seeing as well as hearing. The most prominent of these new evangelists was a man named Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts was born in 1918 in Oklahoma, the son of a Pentecostal preacher. His childhood was marked by illness. He had serious health problems that he believed were healed through prayer, and this experience of divine healing became central to his entire theological understanding. He believed that God wanted people to be healthy, wealthy, and successful, and that prayer and faith were the means by which believers could access those blessings. This doctrine would come to be called the prosperity gospel, though it predated that terminology by decades.
Stupid fuck.
Roberts began his career as an itinerant healing evangelist in the 1940s, traveling from town to town, holding tent meetings where people would come seeking healing. He would pray for them, sometimes touch them, and he would interpret healings, or the lack thereof, as evidence of their faith or lack thereof. He was charismatic, energetic, and he built a significant following. But Roberts was smarter and more business savvy than most of his contemporaries. He began to build media platforms systematically. He started a magazine called Abundant Life. He began recording his services and distributing them. In 1954, he founded the Oral Roberts University, which was not just a seminary, but a full university with a particular theological vision. He was building an institution, not just a ministry. When Roberts began his television broadcasts in the 1950s, something important happened. His theology, which emphasized healing and prosperity, found a massive audience on television. There was something about television that made people want to believe in tangible material benefits from their faith. Radio was intimate, but television was proof. You could see people who claimed to have been healed. You could see Roberts' expensive suit, his confident smile, large, beautiful buildings where he preached.
Holy Ghost.
Television made everything seem more real, more legitimate, more attainable. Roberts' sermons were different from traditional Christian preaching in a subtle but important way. He preached what some scholars call prosperity theology, or name it and claim it theology. The idea that God wants his followers to be healthy and wealthy, and that if you have enough faith and give enough money to God's work, you will receive material blessings in return. This was theologically controversial. Traditional Christian theology, both Catholic and Protestant, had generally taught that wealth could be spiritually dangerous, that Jesus had explicitly warned against the love of money, that suffering and sacrifice were noble spiritual states. Prosperity theology inverted this. Poverty was not noble. It was a sign of lack of faith. Wealth was evidence of God's favor. Material success was a sign of spiritual maturity. This message resonated powerfully with Americans in the 1950s and 1960s. Post-World War II, America was experiencing unprecedented prosperity. The middle class was expanding. Consumer goods were becoming available to more people than ever before. There was a sense that you could have it all: a good life, a successful career, a nice home, and spiritual fulfillment too. Prosperity theology gave theological justification to this dream. It said your faith could be tested and proven by how much money you made, how nice your home was, how successful your career became.
God damn it.
God wanted you to have these things. God wanted you to be successful. What Oral Roberts understood, and what he communicated through his television broadcasts, was that giving money to the church, to his ministry specifically, was an investment in heaven. Give $10 and receive a 100-fold blessing. Give $100 and receive a 1,000-fold blessing. This was
why did he resign?
His theology. It was presented with genuine spiritual language and
That
conviction.
makes no damn sense.
But mathematically, theologically, it was a system that required constant growth in donations to be sustainable. If everyone who gave $100 received the promised 1,000-fold blessing, exponential growth would be necessary to meet those obligations. This created an inherent pressure to keep raising more and more money, to tell the more compelling stories of miraculous provision, to push followers to give more aggressively. By the 1970s, Oral Roberts' operation was one of the largest religious organizations in America. The Oral Roberts University had become a real university with accreditation and competitive academics. His television program was seen by millions. He had built a media empire that rivaled the reach of major television networks. And he had made a fortune, hundreds of millions of dollars over his lifetime. He lived in mansions, traveled in private jets, and displayed his wealth openly as evidence of God's favor. He was often seen wearing expensive suits, driving luxury cars, living a lifestyle that earlier Christian leaders would have been uncomfortable with, but that seemed to match perfectly with his message about what faith should produce. Now, I want you to think about something. If you're watching this and you've encountered prosperity gospel theology in your own church or online, what was your initial reaction? Did it feel spiritually empowering, or did something feel off about it? The comment section below is open, and I really value hearing what you've observed. Because the rise of prosperity theology represents one of the most significant theological shifts in American Christianity. And it wasn't inevitable. It happened because people chose to preach it and people chose to believe it. But those choices had consequences. By the 1980s, television evangelism had become a genuinely massive cultural phenomenon. There were dozens of major televangelists with national platforms. Some of them were building legitimate institutions. Jerry Falwell had created Liberty University and was using his television platform to build the religious right as a political movement. Pat Robertson had founded CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network, which eventually became a major media corporation. Jimmy Swaggart was preaching in a style that was emotionally intense and theologically conservative. Kenneth Copeland was taking prosperity theology to new extremes, claiming that his faith had purchased him a private jet that had been provided by God. Benny Hinn was performing what he called miracle crusades, traveling the world claiming to heal the sick through the power of the Holy Spirit. But it was during this decade that cracks began to appear in the facade. The first major scandal involved Jimmy Swaggart. Swaggart was a Pentecostal evangelist who preached with incredible emotional intensity about sin, about sexual temptation, about the need to resist worldly desires. He had built a massive television ministry and was known for his energetic preaching style and his personal austerity. In 1988, he was caught with a prostitute in a car. The scandal was enormous. Swaggart was forced to confess his sin publicly, to acknowledge his hypocrisy, and to step back from his ministry, though he eventually attempted to rebuild. But before that scandal fully played out, in 1987, another scandal had already erupted. Jim Bakker, who ran the PTL Club, one of the most watched religious television programs in America, had been accused of sexual assault and fraud. Bakker eventually went to prison for mail fraud and wire fraud. His ministry, which had included a theme park called Heritage USA and a satellite television network, collapsed.
God damn it.
Millions of followers who had given money to Bakker's ministry lost their investment, and thousands of people who had worked for PTL lost their jobs. The PTL scandal was particularly shocking because Bakker had built what appeared to be a legitimate religious corporation. Heritage USA had been one of the largest theme parks in America at its peak, attracting millions of visitors. Bakker's rise and fall was dramatic and public and utterly humiliating. What was remarkable about both the Swaggart and Bakker scandals was how they were covered by the media and how the public responded. The public was shocked, but many of the followers of these ministries remained loyal. They explained the scandals as spiritual warfare, as the devil's attack on God's word, as temporary lapses that didn't undermine the fundamental truth of the ministry. This resilience, this ability to maintain belief, despite overwhelming evidence of hypocrisy and fraud, became a signature characteristic of the most devoted followers of televangelist ministries. The 1980s and 1990s also saw the rise of what scholars began calling the prosperity gospel in its most extreme forms. Kenneth Copeland and his wife Gloria Copeland preached a theology in which faith, combined with the right words spoken in the right way, could literally create wealth and health. They taught that believers should claim their blessings by speaking them into existence. I claim financial breakthrough, you would say, and then you would wait for God to deliver it. The mechanism for receiving these blessings, however, was to give to their ministry. Give a seed offering, they would say, and God will cause it to grow. Give sacrificially, trust God, and watch what happens. The Copeland's ministry grew to extraordinary proportions. They built churches, broadcast networks, universities, and publishing companies. They accumulated vast wealth.
That's
Kenneth
what a
Copeland in
bishop can do
particular
to
became
you.
famous for his private jet, which he claimed he needed for his ministry work. When questioned about the extravagance, he responded that God wanted his servants to have the best. First-class travel, luxury homes, expensive clothing, these were not signs of worldliness, but signs of faith and God's approval. During this period, there emerged a troubling pattern. The televangelists who accumulated the most wealth and the most power were often the ones who preached most aggressively that God wanted their followers to be wealthy. But the wealth was rarely shared. The followers gave, but the leaders kept. The theology promised a 1,000-fold return on every dollar given. But what actually happened was that the money flowed upward from ordinary believers to the leaders in their organizations. By the 2000s, some journalists and researchers began documenting these patterns more systematically. In 2007, a Senate committee investigated 6 major televangelists, including Kenneth Copeland, Oral Roberts' successor Oral Roberts Jr., Creflo Dollar, Joyce Meyer, Eddie Long, and Benny Hinn. The investigation found that these organizations were operating with minimal financial transparency, that they were paying ministers enormous salaries, that they were buying private jets and luxury real estate, and that they were not being held accountable by any meaningful oversight. These were religious organizations with tax-exempt status, meaning they didn't pay federal income taxes. The followers' contributions were tax-deductible, providing a financial incentive for wealthy donors to give. But the organizations themselves operated with almost no regulation. One case deserves special attention. Creflo Dollar, yes, that's actually his name, is a pastor who built an enormous church in Atlanta and a television ministry that reaches millions. Dollar preaches prosperity theology explicitly. He teaches his followers that financial success is a sign of God's favor, and that tithing to his church is an investment in heaven. For years, Dollar appeared on television in expensive suits, driving luxury cars, wearing luxury watches, telling his followers that their faith would produce similar blessings if they gave sacrificially. Prosperity theology and a television ministry, it's actually his name. Case deserves special attention. Creflo Dollar, yes, that's actually his name, is a pastor who built an enormous church in Atlanta and a television ministry that reaches millions. Dollar preaches prosperity theology explicitly. He teaches his followers that financial success is a sign of God's favor, and that tithing to his church is an investment in heaven. For years, Dollar appeared on television in expensive suits, driving luxury cars, wearing luxury watches, telling his followers that their faith would produce similar blessings if they gave sacrificially. In 2015, it was reported that Dollar had been asking his followers to give money to help him purchase a $65 million private jet. The initial response was so negative that he temporarily backed off the campaign. But the pattern was clear. The theology promised blessings to followers, but the actual wealth was going to the ministers. If you're following this narrative, you might be wondering, how did this happen? How did something that started with Amy Semple McPherson, someone who genuinely believed in serving God and did real good in her community, you might be wondering, how did this happen? How did something that started with Amy Semple McPherson, someone who genuinely...
That's cute.
believed in serving God and did real good in her community, transform into a system that seemed designed primarily to enrich religious leaders? The answer is complex, but it has several parts. First, there's the technological piece. Radio and television are powerful media. They create a sense of intimacy and connection that face-to-face preaching sometimes doesn't. When you listen to a preacher on radio or watch them on television, You experience them in your private space, at your choosing, repeatedly. This creates a psychological bond that's different from traditional church membership. People feel like they know the preacher personally, even if they've never met them. This creates intense loyalty and makes followers less likely to be critical. Second, there's the structural problem. Traditional churches are governed by denominations or by congregational boards that provide some oversight. Even Catholic churches, which have a strong hierarchical structure, are accountable to the Pope and to canon law. Televangelist ministries, on the other hand, are often operated as corporations or as non-profit organizations, controlled by a single individual or a small group of individuals. There's no meaningful oversight. The followers give money, but they don't have governance rights. They can't vote out the leadership, they can't audit the finances, they can complain, but they have no institutional mechanism to enforce accountability. Third, there's the theological problem. Prosperity gospel theology, especially in its most extreme forms, is psychologically powerful because it offers a simple explanation for inequality. If you're poor, it's because you don't have enough faith or you're not giving enough. If someone else is wealthy, it's because they have more faith or they gave more. This theology actually discourages people from asking hard questions about economic injustice or systemic inequality.
God damn it.
Instead of questioning the system, followers blame themselves for not having enough faith. This is genuinely cruel because it tells people that their poverty is their own fault, that God could make them rich if they just believed harder. Fourth, there's the money. Television ministries are expensive to operate. Buying broadcast time, producing programming, maintaining facilities, it all costs money. But the money that flows in from followers can be enormous. If you have a television program watched by millions, and even a small percentage of those viewers send money, the total can be staggering. The temptation to profit from that system is intense. And once a minister has tasted the lifestyle that wealth provides, there's enormous psychological pressure to keep it going, to keep asking for more money, to keep the system functioning. Finally, there's the problem of cult-like structures. Many televangelist ministries, particularly the larger ones, develop characteristics that scholars of religion associate with high-control groups or cults. The leader is presented as uniquely anointed by God, beyond criticism, specially chosen. Followers who question the leader or the ministry are told they're being used by the devil. There's pressure to give more and more, to sacrifice more and more for the ministry. There's isolation from outside perspectives and outside communities. Family members who aren't part of the ministry are sometimes discouraged. The result is that followers become psychologically dependent on the leader and the community, and they become increasingly resistant to outside information that contradicts what they've been taught. Let me ask you something. If you've been involved in a church community where criticism of leadership was discouraged, where you were told that questioning was spiritual rebellion, I'd like to hear about that experience. What eventually made you either accept it or leave? The comments are open below. Open? In the 2010s and 2020s, the televangelist world faced new challenges. Younger people in America were increasingly skeptical of organized religion generally, and the scandals involving televangelist ministers were increasingly visible and difficult to ignore. When Joyce Meyer, one of the most prominent televangelist ministers, was exposed as living an extraordinarily wealthy lifestyle while preaching to poor and middle-class followers, it became harder for defenders to explain away. When prosperity gospel ministers were caught asking followers to give money for things like personal jets, the disconnect between the theology and the reality became obvious even to sympathetic observers. But the televangelists adapted. Some of them moved to online platforms. They built podcasts and YouTube channels. They created apps that allowed followers to watch services and give offerings from their phones. The technology changed, but the model remained the same. Tell followers that God wants them to be wealthy, that giving to the ministry is an investment in heaven, that God will multiply their money back to them. Then keep most of the money yourself. One particularly troubling development has been the increasing connection between prosperity gospel theology and right-wing political movements. Jerry Falwell Jr., who took over his father's Liberty University and who had built an enormous amount of power in evangelical Christianity, became one of the most prominent evangelical supporters of Donald Trump. Falwell argued that Christian voters should support Trump because Trump would deliver conservative judges who would overturn Roe v. Wade and protect religious freedom. What happened next was striking. Falwell's political alliance with Trump didn't require him to moderate his theology or his wealth accumulation. Instead, prosperity gospel theology and right-wing politics became increasingly aligned. Ministers who preached that God wanted followers to be wealthy also preached that voters should support political candidates who promised lower taxes and reduced regulation. The theology and the politics reinforced each other. God wanted you to be successful and to keep what you made, which meant voting for lower taxes and less government involvement in the economy. It was a perfectly coherent worldview from a certain perspective, even if it bore almost no resemblance to the teachings of Jesus as reported in the Gospels. The Falwell case is instructive in another way because it shows what happens when the system finally cracks. In 2020, photographs emerged of Jerry Falwell Jr. in compromising situations. He had been having an affair with a member of his household staff. His marriage was apparently open, or at least complicated. The revelation was shocking, not because affairs happen, they do, but because Falwell had built his entire career and his university on the principles of moral and sexual propriety. He had expelled students for violations of the Sexual Conduct Code that were far less severe than his own behavior. He had preached about sexual purity while living a double life. When the photographs became public, Falwell was forced to resign from Liberty University, which was appropriate. But what was remarkable was that many of his followers remained loyal to him even after his downfall. Some argued that his personal behavior didn't affect the validity of the university or the importance of his political work. This pattern of loyalty persisting despite evidence of hypocrisy and fraud is one of the most psychologically interesting aspects of the televangelist phenomenon. It suggests that the followers' attachment to these ministries isn't primarily based on rational evaluation of evidence. It's based on psychological identification, emotional connection, and spiritual commitment. People have been taught to trust the minister, to see them as a voice for God, to interpret criticism as spiritual warfare. Once those neural pathways are established, it becomes very difficult to change them, even when presented with overwhelming evidence that the minister is corrupt.
You must have a whore.
The COVID-19 pandemic created another inflection point for televangelists. Some churches, including large television-based ministries, had to suspend in-person services or dramatically limit them. This created a temporary financial challenge because giving typically decreased when people weren't gathering in person. But many of the major ministries adapted quickly. They moved services online, they emphasized the importance of continued giving, even during the pandemic, and they found new ways to create a sense of community through digital platforms. Interestingly, some of the ministries used the pandemic as an occasion to ask for more aggressive giving, framing it as a time when God's work was especially needed. Some followed the prosperity gospel script even more aggressively. If you give during this crisis, God will protect you from the virus, they suggested. It was deeply cruel timing in theology.
Who's that pig sing?
Now, as we reach the present moment, what has happened to American televangelism? The answer is complicated. The big operations are still operating. Kenneth Copeland's ministry is thriving financially. Benny Hinn continues to hold events and broadcast services.
Now fuck up
Joyce
the
Meyer remains one of the most visible prosperity gospel teachers. But the cultural position of televangelists has changed significantly. They're no longer the unchallenged authorities they once were. Social media has enabled survivors of harmful ministry practices to share their stories. Journalists have investigated and exposed fraud, financial abuse, and sexual abuse in various ministries. Books and documentaries have examined prosperity gospel theology and its spiritual and social consequences. More importantly, the cultural faith in televangelists has eroded. Young people in particular are increasingly skeptical. They look at these ministers and they see wealth disparity, they see theological problems, they see hypocrisy. They have access to information about the history of fraud and abuse in these ministries, and they compare the prosperity gospel to the gospel message of Jesus, which is radically different. It's harder for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. Jesus told a rich young ruler to give away his wealth and follow him. Jesus washed his disciples' feet. Jesus had no place to lay his head. The Jesus of the gospel and the prosperity gospel Jesus of the television ministers are essentially different figures.
Was I beating his ass too hard?
Here's what's important to understand. The televangelists didn't emerge in a vacuum, and they didn't persist simply because people were gullible or stupid. American culture created the conditions for them to thrive. Americans were hungry for certainty in a world of uncertainty. Americans believed in technology as a force for progress. Americans valued wealth as a sign of worth. Americans were willing to believe in miracles if the right person told them to. And crucially, Americans created economic systems and tax codes that allowed religious organizations to accumulate enormous wealth with minimal accountability. The rise and fall of American televangelists, then, is really a story about American culture itself. It's a story about what happens when we value charisma over character, when we prioritize wealth over wisdom, when we believe that technology can solve spiritual problems, when we allow unchecked power to concentrate in the hands of individuals without institutional oversight. The most recent scandals have involved younger ministers who learned from the old guard televangelists and attempted to take the model even further. Some have been caught operating schemes that are almost purely financial frauds, offering sowing opportunities where followers give money with explicit or implicit promises of return. Some have built personal brands around motivational speaking, mixed with watered-down theology. Some have turned themselves into celebrities through social media, using Instagram and TikTok to reach followers too young to have watched television ministries, but who are hungry for spiritual direction and inspiration. What's emerged in recent years is a kind of second-order problem. Not only are there the original televangelists still operating, but there's the entire ecosystem of smaller influencers and emerging ministers who have learned the model and are attempting to replicate it on a smaller scale. They may not have television shows, but they have podcasts and YouTube channels and Instagram followings. They preach the same prosperity gospel. They ask for the same kind of aggressive giving. They offer the same implicit contract. Give to us and God will make you successful. The question now is whether American televangelism as a cultural phenomenon is in genuine decline or whether it's simply transforming. The evidence suggests both. Attendance at large churches is declining, particularly among younger generations. Trust in religious is eroding. The cultural power that a televangelist like Oral Roberts once wielded is now fragmented across hundreds of smaller voices and platforms.
Holy Ghost, damn it.
The fundamental dynamic, charismatic leaders, media platforms, promise, but they have podcasts and
wow, the spit,
on a smaller scale. They may not have television.
Spit. Rudimentary spit. She's cute.
Shows, but they have podcasts,
I touched both the heads.
YouTube channels, and Instagram followings. They preach the same prosperity gospel. They ask for the same kind of aggressive giving. They offer the same implicit contract. Give to us and God will make you successful. The question now is whether American televangelism as a cultural phenomenon is in genuine decline or whether it's simply transforming. The evidence suggests both. Attendance at large churches is declining, particularly among younger generations. Trust in religious authority has eroded. The cultural power that a televangelist like Oral Roberts once wielded is now fragmented across hundreds of smaller voices and platforms. But the fundamental dynamic, charismatic leaders, media platforms, promises of blessing, requests for money, minimal accountability, persists. It's just distributed now rather than concentrated in a few mega figures. I want to come back to Amy Semple McPherson for a final moment, because I think her story tells us something important.
Oh, she cute. Boop.
Amy genuinely believed she was serving God. She genuinely did good work.
She's cute.
She also exploited her followers' faith to enrich herself and build her own empire. I want to come back to Amy Semple McPherson for a final moment, because I think her story tells us something important. Amy genuinely believed she was serving God. She genuinely did good work. She also exploited her followers' faith to enrich herself and build her own empire.
What is that?
Both things were true
Dorky-ass
simultaneously. She wasn't a cartoon villain. She was a complex human being who combined genuine spiritual conviction with personal ambition, and who lived in a cultural moment where the combination of those impulses led to extraordinary power and wealth. Many of the televangelists who followed her share that same complexity. They're not all frauds, though some are. They're not all cynical manipulators, though some are. Many of them genuinely believe what they're preaching. But the system they operate within, the media platform, the money, the lack of accountability, corrupts that belief and twists it into something harmful. The real question we need to ask ourselves is this. What would happen if we fundamentally restructured how religious organizations operate? What if we required greater financial transparency? What if we limited the wealth accumulation of religious leaders? What if we insisted on meaningful congregational governance rather than allowing single individuals to control massive organizations? What if we created ethical frameworks that held religious leaders to account for how they use their platform and their power? Some religious traditions have these things. The Catholic Church has financial accountability structures, though they've been shown to be insufficient at times. Many mainline Protestant denominations have governance structures that prevent single individuals from accumulating too much power. But the model that enables televangelists to flourish in America, the fusion of charisma, media access, and minimal accountability, that model persists and continues to do damage.
Goddamn Holy
As
Ghost.
we move forward, younger generations of Americans are asking harder questions about organized religion
Holy
generally,
Ghost.
and about these specific ministries
I
in
said,
particular.
Holy Ghost.
They're asking whether a ministry that asks for tithes while the leader drives a luxury car is aligned with Jesus' teaching. They're asking whether promising divine healing while accepting no responsibility for failures is ethical. They're asking whether concentrating power and wealth in the hands of religious leaders is what God would want. These are the right questions to ask. What do you think?
Fucking shit.
Having listened to this history, do you think televangelism will continue to thrive in America, or is it in genuine decline? Have you or anyone you know been affected by prosperity gospel theology, either positively or negatively? What would need to change for religious organizations to become more transparent and accountable? Let me know in the comments. If you found this story valuable, if it challenged you to think differently about how religion functions in our culture, please like this video. Subscribe to Professor Archive so you can follow the deep dives into how American culture actually works. And if you want to support this kind of thorough, well-researched documentary work, consider supporting through Super Thanks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Goddamn fucking shit. God damn it. God fucking damn it. Oh, fucking god damn it. God, this goddamn clusterfuck. Dumbass.
Alright, what's up everybody? Myth Vision, Derek here. It's just me wanting to talk about how we created ourselves, okay? I want to start with a question that many of us probably have thought about or think about often. If there really is one eternal creator who made every human being, why does the history of God look so much like the history of humans, of us? Think about it. Why do the gods change when human societies change? Why do they speak the languages of the people who worship them? Why do they care about the same borders of land, the same enemies, the same food rules and kings and hierarchies their worshippers care about? Like, they They care about the same things their worshippers care.
I fucked his.
Why does God get more abstract at almost the exact pace human thinking gets more abstract?
I fucked his.
Here's something that changed my life, honestly, when I finally saw this during my myth-fishing journey. Gods have a history, and you can dig their history up. They have a bio. You can watch the idea of God being born, growing, changing jobs, absorbing rivals, and climbing from a spirit in the grass all the way up to the God of the philosophers. So, in this video, today, right now in this video, I want to walk you through that history and tell you why it's the real reason, or at least one of the main real reasons, why I stopped believing. It's not some atheist book, but like the history.
I'm fixing that ear, you're right.
I want to get honest with you about the part that never truly goes away. Because I still lie awake at night. Not every single night.
I just eared his rug.
Very often, I have deep
right
thoughts, and I lie awake at night wondering why there's anything at all. Okay? I do wonder this. Now, I'm sure we've all thought about it, and it might be a simple, dumb answer like, existence is. It just always was. It is what it is. And get over it.
That sounds like God.
We're going to get there, though. Like, it is a serious question I have. And I want to get to
That's one of those pieces
I'm
you
going
buy.
to not pretend that I have that solved. All right? So let's lay one ground rule first, okay? Because it shapes a lot of what we're going to discuss. Religion didn't climb as a neat staircase. First animism, then polytheism, then monotheism. Like humanity's leveling up.
Dumbass.
The staircase was a 19th century theory,
Get that
and most scholars
here.
don't accept it the way that it's been formulated. A famous case is Sir James George Fraser's position in The Golden Bough. I highly recommend everybody read it. And just there's so much stuff there, but there's also a dated idea. Real religious history moves more like a river with branches that split, cross, and flow back together, okay? Animism, ancestor worship, pantheons, high gods, philosophical abstractions, they overlap and coexist.
I just pushed these
Gods
buttons
merge, split, disappear, and come back. Some cultures drift toward one god, some drift away. But the water moves. And the same patterns keep showing up. We fill the world with spirits. We organize the spirits into families and kingdoms. One god rises above the rest, or absorbs their jobs. And then the philosophers strip that god down to almost pure abstraction. That's the pattern I'm going to follow. And I'm going to show you one case study where you can watch every stage happen inside your Bible. So, go back with me. All right, we got to go back a little bit. Way back.
Catch one of those pieces you buy.
Before anyone wrote anything
I'm fixing to
down
get myself a whore.
at all. You're an early human on the savannah.
I
Tall
said
grass
I'm fixing
rustles
to get myself
behind
a
you.
little
You've
whore.
heard this one before. Two options. It's the wind, or it's a lion. Now think about the cost
You're
of getting it wrong each way. If
fucking
you jump, did you hear that? If you jump at the wind, you've lost nothing. Just a little adrenaline. Maybe you need to eat to catch up your energy. But if you sit there calmly waiting for peer-reviewed evidence to appear, all right, that it's evidence of a lion, well, your lunch and your gene pool's cut off. You're done. So we need to understand evolution doesn't tune you to be accurate. It's not an accurate machine. It doesn't tune you. It tunes you to over-detect. Better to see 100 agents that aren't there than miss the one that is. Cognitive scientists of religion have a specific name for this. They call it hyperactive agency detection. And I read this in a book called... what is it? There's a scientist. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. There's a bunch of scholars. One of them, Stuart Guthrie, I think, is one of them that actually talks about this. Others, too. The Believing Brain, by the way, you should read it, talks about this. It's why you see faces in clouds and electrical outlets. It's why a creaking house early in the morning at like 2 a.m. you hear the wood.
Hold!
You hear that noise? Feels like somebody might be inside it. You assume there's someone there. Now, put that brain in a world with no meteorology. There's no way for them to know about germ theory, no neuroscience. Thunder sounds angry. The river gives life all summer and then drowns your neighbor. Disease walks into the village and nobody can see what's causing it. You dream about your dead father and he's right there talking to you, and you wake up and he's gone. What is that world going to feel like? It's going to feel like it's full of invisible persons with intentions. Your brain doesn't ask, what did this? It asks, who? Who did this? Who's angry? What do they want? Can I make a deal? That's how our mind works. That's the oldest layer of religion, what scholars call animism. The river is alive. The tree has a spirit. The thunder is somebody, right? And I want to be clear, I'm not calling our ancestors stupid. They're not.
They are
If it weren't for them, we wouldn't be where we're at. Given the tools they had, treating the world like it's full of persons was the smartest bet available to them. It just happens to be a bet made by a brain built to find agents whether they're there or not, and humans still do it today. Right? So it's not just our ancestors. Still happening all over the world. So I want you to think about this too, because it's going to matter at the end. Explaining why a belief comes naturally doesn't disprove it. What it does prove is this. The feeling of presence, of agency, of somebody behind things comes standard with a human brain. You don't need an actual spirit in the river to explain why a person experiences the river as alive.
God damn it.
All right. Now we start to settle down.
God.
We farm.
Damn it.
We build villages, then cities, then kingdoms. And watch what the spirits do. They get promoted right along with us. As societies specialize, the gods specialize. A storm god, a grain goddess, a war god, a craftsman god, a goddess of childbirth. And look at the structure. The pantheons are royal courts. A high god sitting as king, a counselor under him, divine messengers running errands, rivalries, family drama, territory disputes. Mesopotamia has it, Egypt has it, Greece has it, Canaan has it. I mean, almost everywhere has it. Why do the gods live in a palace hierarchy? Because the people who imagined them did. The gods eat, drink, fight, cheat on their spouses, and get jealous. Zeus behaves like a Bronze Age king because Bronze Age people wrote him. And once you compare cultures, something gets hard to ignore. You can't. The gods are remarkably local. Greek gods look Greek. Egyptian gods fit Egyptian institutions. The gods don't arrive revealing one clear theology to all of humanity. They literally arrive, as you find them in history, wearing the clothes of the culture that imagined them. This reminds me of Xenophanes, when he talked about, as he's a geographer, he traveled. He went to all these different cultures from Africa to the north to you name it. And he said that he noticed that the people have gods that look like them. The blonde-haired people have a blonde-haired god. The dark-haired people have a dark-haired god. Africans have a god that looks like them. And pretty much he kind of makes this like logical conclusion that if dogs and horses and cats could make gods, their gods would look like cats and horses and dogs. Like the point is that all of the cultures have a human imagination, and the human perception is what they imagine the god to be. The unfortunate part is Xenophanes didn't take it the step further that I'm going. He suspected that there was one divine deity, but it wasn't anything the human conception or anything that has like human anthropomorphic elements about it, okay? So the kingdoms swallow kingdoms over history. Watch what the gods do. They swallow each other. When Babylon rises, Marduk rises with it. And there's a whole text where he absorbs the powers and titles of the other gods. Joshua Bowen on to talk about this. When he talks about the ancient Assyriology material showing this stuff, right? This is a very, very interesting point. Political consolidation on earth, divine consolidation in heaven. So the road toward one supreme God was already being paved by empire long before anybody said the others don't exist at all. We see this also in Egypt with what some would say proto-monotheism, if not a form of monotheism with Akhenaten. I've had Karakuni, Egyptologist, on, where she's thought that Akhenaten was some form of early monotheism, and it was used in a political fashion.
Come on, you slut.
And that she thinks that one of the greatest weapons people have come up with was a one-god pantheon. It works quite well with consolidating power, as we've talked about political consolidation, and helping one person reign supreme with the power of the one and only divine God. They have the direct connection. This is where you have questions of priests and all sorts of funny things that go on, right? And so shifting gears a little, this brings me to the part where it gets personal, okay? Because what started my questioning wasn't Richard Dawkins. I watched the debate, several debates. I didn't like him when I was a Christian, or Christopher Hitchens. Neither one of them got me doubting. It was the Bible itself. I was taught to picture the God of Israel as the eternal, universal creator, fully revealed from page 1. But the Bible itself remembers an older world. Go read it. And once I saw that older world, I couldn't stop seeing it. I couldn't stop. I had to ask questions. Take, for example, Psalm 82. God takes his place in the divine council, and he passes judgment in the middle of the gods. Plural. Gods. A courtroom full of gods, exactly like the councils at Megiddo and in Mesopotamia. Or Deuteronomy 32, verses 8 and 9. The version in most of your Bibles says, the nations were divided according to the sons of Israel. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the old Greek tradition, you look at the Septuagint, preserve the older reading. Sons of God, divine beings. The Most High divides up the nations, and Yahweh's allotted share, Yahweh's, is Jacob, Israel. In the oldest form of the text, Yahweh receives his people inside a populated divine order. That order world is sitting right there in your Bible, and it even seems to say Yahweh is receiving an inheritance from El Elyon, a higher deity that's the head honcho, the same way the ancient Canaanite system ran. You had El, and then you had sons, Baal and others, Yam, etc., various deities. This depicts that same pantheon, where Yahweh is a son of El, receiving an inheritance along with the 70 other sons, the other brothers. Come on. By the way, this goes back to the Hittite stuff you can find in the 70. There's just too much to cover in this video. Then another question comes up in my head. Where does Yahweh come from geographically? Some of the oldest poetry, according to many critical scholars in the Bible, Judges 5, Deuteronomy 33, Habakkuk 3, has him marching up from the south, from Seir, from Teman, from Paran, a storm and warrior deity out of the desert. Those geographical memories are baked into the text. Scholars like Mark S. Smith have traced how this deity merges with El, the old high god of Canaan I just mentioned from Deuteronomy 32, until the two eventually become one god with two names. Archaeology keeps those receipts, fam. Go look at it. Inscriptions you can find right now at a site called Contillida Druid read Yahweh and his Asherah, the goddess or her sacred symbol, but it's a personified figure standing next to Yahweh in this. Either way, a divine partner is standing next to Yahweh in the actual region of ancient Israel, centuries before the theology got cleaned up. And you know the famous saying, thou doth protest too much? The biblical writers spent centuries polemicizing against Asherah worship. You don't fight a battle that isn't happening. The Bible even brags in the old way. the Song of the Sea asks, who is like Yahweh among the gods? That's a boast. And a boast only works if there are other gods to compare him to. Same with the commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. It isn't a philosophy lecture proving other gods don't exist. That's not what's happening. It's a loyalty demand. Scholars call it monolatry. Worship one God without denying the rest. So, here's the full claim. There are no other gods at all. Shows up clearly late in the exile in Isaiah 45. I am the Lord and there is no other. Apart from me, there is no God. Just look at the timing, y'all. The nation has been crushed. The temple is rubble. The people are in Babylon. And right there, their God stops being merely Israel's God and becomes the only God, the maker of everything, bigger than Babylon and running Babylon's kings like puppets. The concept developed. It has a datable history, and you just watched it happen. Many scholars have seen this for a long time now. All right. Now it's confession time. When I was a believer, I ran a closed loop. I started with God. I read the Bible as His Word, and then I used the Bible to confirm the God I already believed had given it to me. And I would do this again and again, round and round. But what broke that circle wasn't an argument. It was literally history. Because my God had a biography, a hometown, a career path. He starts regional. He merges with a senior God. He takes over the council. And eventually his people declare the other gods never existed at all. Zeus has a biography like that. Marduk has a biography like that. And the day I realized Yahweh had one too, the whole thing broke open for me. Things with biographies are made by history. History isn't made by them. A believer will look at all of this and say, that's progressive revelation, duh. God's slowly educating His people. But I don't think they notice what that costs. You need independent evidence that a timeless God was steering from behind the process. Because the historical evidence by itself documents exactly one thing: human beings changing their ideas about God. And I couldn't use the finished theology as proof of the very agent who was supposedly guiding it. That's the going round and round circle again. And the circle was broken. So again, it kills me, but people saw this 2,500 years ago, okay? Again, to bring up Xenophanes. If you don't know, I mentioned he was a geographer, but he was a Greek philosopher. He was around 500 BCE. He looked around the Mediterranean. He pointed out that Ethiopians depict their gods looking Ethiopian, and Thracians depict theirs with red hair and blue eyes. And then he pushed it further and said that if horses and cattle had hands and could draw, they'd draw their gods as horses and cattle. That's the entire insight of comparative religion, delivered in one shot 5 centuries before Jesus. Everybody's God looks suspiciously like the people who worship Him, or them, really. Because some might have a goddess, some might have different kind of divinities. And again, I need to emphasize, Xenophanes was not an atheist, all right? He didn't become one, he wasn't one. He saw the projection that we're describing here, and then he traded the human-shaped gods for one of the greatest gods. Nothing like mortals in body or thought. He caught everybody else's projection and kept a refined version of his own. Socrates pulled another thread. In Plato's Euthyphro, he asks, is something good because the gods love it, or do the gods love it because it's good? Either answer you pick, the gods quietly stop being the foundation of morality. And notice, Socrates wasn't a modern skeptic either. He talked about a divine sign that guided him. It didn't save him. Athens executed him, and impiety was on the charge sheet. Questioning the gods could cost you your life. And Plato and Aristotle, they kept a god, but look at what they did to him. Plato's craftsman in the Timaeus doesn't create from nothing the way people usually read Genesis. He's imposing order on chaos that's already there. Aristotle's unmoved mover isn't a person who hears prayers. It's a mind the cosmos leans on. They sanded off the lightning bolts, the love affairs, the beer, the mountain. They made the gods less tribal, less physical, less human. But here's the question they couldn't quite ask.
I dicked up your
They removed the body, the wife, the thunderbolt, and they kept the most human feature of all, a mind with intentions. What if that's the last projection? What if the refined philosopher's God is just the agency instinct wearing a toga? And I get why they stopped there. Two reasons. First, it was dangerous. Ask Socrates. Second, I mean, he was accused of it, like of being an atheist, not believing there were any gods. If you're looking for atheism in the ancient world, Tim Whitmarsh, the classicist, has a great book on that. Second, they didn't have the tools. No archaeology was digging up Old Garrett, no Dead Sea Scrolls, no comparative mythology library, no evolutionary biology, no cognitive science. The list goes on and on. So no, I'm not claiming to be smarter than Plato. Nobody watching this is probably smarter than Plato, for all I know. I just get to stand on 24 more centuries of evidence than he had. He took the step his world allowed him. I'm taking the next one. I don't think that's arrogance. That's what he would have said to do had he been alive today, I imagine. Okay. So if the gods aren't real, suppose I'm correct on thinking that might be the case, why does a creator feel so natural? Why does it still feel like that to me even? I don't even believe it anymore, but it feels natural. Because the category itself is built into us. It's not just the line in the grass. Developmental psychologist Deborah Kellerman's work is the famous example. Her work has shown kids are wired to explain things by purpose. Ask a young kid why rocks are pointy, and you'll get so animals can scratch themselves. Clouds are for raining. Everything is for something, and we never fully grow out of that. Here's how the trick works. Inside our experience, organized things come from minds. Houses have builders, books have authors, tools have makers. So when we look at the universe, we extend the pattern outward.
God damn it.
This must have a maker too, automatically. That's not a conclusion you reasoned into. It is a reflex that we have. But the universe isn't a house. It's not an object inside the universe. It's the whole thing. Nobody has ever watched the universe get manufactured.
God damn it.
We don't even know if causation works outside of time, or whether the phrase "before the universe" means anything at all. The instinct that served you with houses and lines is out of its depth at that scale, even beyond my own perception. And here's the test that I would say really made me convinced something's up here. If one true God were revealing himself to humanity, you'd expect consistency. Same message, same God, everywhere. If human brains were projecting, you'd expect the intuition to be universal, but the content to be local. Every culture inventing gods. No two cultures inventing the same ones. Just look around. Which world do we live in? The intuition is everywhere. The gods are all different. That is the fingerprint of projection. You can see the signs. The believer's move here is divine.
King Sullivan the fuck out of you.
God reveals gradually. God accommodates. God stays out of sight. But the world we actually have is exactly the world you'd expect if similar human minds were generating different gods under different local conditions. The apologist has to explain the data away. I just have to read the data, and I think it's obvious. Maybe I'm projecting as well. Maybe I'm being too hard on them. I don't know. You tell me in the comments. I think another honest part, because I promised you guys, why is there something rather than nothing? We talked about this at the beginning. Why does reality exist at all? What is consciousness even doing here? I don't know. This is a real thing. I really do have sometimes I think about it and go, God, this is too crazy to be real. Nobody knows. Not me, not the physicists, not the theologians, and I feel that vertigo, okay? The same one you feel some nights, it genuinely does get to me. Like, it's shocking. If there is something more, we probably have no conception to make sense of it. That's where I'm at with it. I don't know what to say, and I'm open to it, okay? I don't want to sound like just some closed-off dude. I just think that the concepts of God are human. If we thought that epilepsy was a demon, and now we know it's a condition in the brain, neurology, whatever, and we can give a pill and we figured out how to fix it, and it's not a demon, but it's a medical condition that we can easily solve, and we found out that that's not some spirit, and we thought the same thing about the mountain with the God and the earthquake and the lightning, and then we get to the concept of gods in general. I just feel like we're scaling up and realizing what this is. And we're finding out, oh, maybe the whole thing, the whole concept that a demon is behind this might be wrong. That a God must be behind this might be wrong. That's where I'm at. So remember what I told you, like, to think about. That feeling of somebody must be behind all of this is the same feeling that put the lion in the grass, the spirit in the river, and Zeus in the thunder. It's the oldest reflex we have. And every time we could check its work, it was wrong. So I don't hand it the biggest question of all just because that question is still open. I'm not doing God of the gaps here. And honestly, God did it was never an answer anyway. It's the question wearing the costume every time, y'all. You ask why there's something rather than nothing, and it hands you another something, a mind, the most complicated kind of thing we know. And says, don't ask me where that came from. And if God gets to be eternal and necessary, no explanation needed, then why couldn't the foundation of reality be eternal and necessary without being a person? Notice, creation is already a human category. It's borrowed from carpenters and potters and builders. It might just be the wrong tool for a question this far past our experience. So I'm not saying the universe created itself. I'm saying I don't know that it was created at all. Again, with all the examples we can give, Zeus and the Thunderbolt, I've already repeated these things. The kid in Mark chapter 9, foaming from the mouth, might have had epilepsy if there was a real episode, something like that. And today we would look at that and go, okay. Now some people in superstitious context think it's real and they really buy the whole exorcism stuff, but medication and modern science has answers that eliminates that. I think God is the same kind of explanation, all right, aimed at bigger targets. Thunder was a god until it was electricity. The sun was a god until it was a star. Plague was judgment until it was germs. Each time, notice, God didn't get refuted either. He gets repositioned, relocated, pushed one level back, one level up, one level more abstract, from the storm cloud to the sky, from the sky to the cosmos, from the cosmos to outside time and space entirely, where no evidence can ever reach him. And I'm sorry, but that's not God winning the argument, y'all. That's God retreating from it, or you retreating from it, projecting your God outside of that area. This is where I feel we actually stand. We can keep pushing him further into obscurity, one gap at a time, forever. Or we can do what we did with the demon. We can just ask a different question. Remember the oldest question our brains asks? Not what did this, but who? Who did this? Well, the entire history of human progress is us learning one painful case at a time to flip that question back around. Not who is this, what is this? One last thing, because this is where the apologists always want to run. Suppose I granted it. Suppose tomorrow somebody convinced me there's some unknown intelligence beyond reality. I'd still be nowhere near Christianity. I'd be nowhere near Yahweh, the Trinity, the Incarnation, the Resurrection, biblical inspiration, heaven, hell, or any particular church. Every one of those is an additional claim. And every one needs its own evidence. You can't ride the mystery of existence all the way to an empty tomb in Jerusalem. The distance between some mind, somewhere, and the God I was raised with is enormous. And no amount of cosmic vertigo closes that gap, I'm telling you. A mystery is not evidence for the answer you were raised with. It's just a mystery. So, did we create God? Follow the whole line one more time. A rustle in the grass becomes a spirit. The spirits become a pantheon. The pantheon becomes a council. The council collapses into one God. And the philosophers polish that God into an abstraction. Every step tracks something happening to human beings. We can document the humans at every single step. Nobody, has produced comparable evidence of the God. And here's the truth. I could be wrong. Maybe there's some kind of intelligence behind reality. Maybe the truth is stranger than religion and stranger than naturalism. I'm open to evidence because I don't want my skepticism turning into another dogma. But I no longer think a creator is the neutral starting point. It's a human idea with a human history. I just showed you. That's why I'm questioning it. Does that make sense? I hope you understand why I've gotten back to this question and I even questioned that question. We were willing to do the other things. And many of the people who still believe in a divine maker, a creator, or whatever you want to call it, they usually stop to that last point and still have to accept something. I'm just going a little bit further, I think, than they are on that issue. And let me be very clear here. I don't think believers are fools either. I'd be hypocritical because I've been there. They're human. They're running the same software you and I are running. The same software that kept our ancestors alive. The honest thing I need to say is it mockery. Okay? I'm not going to sit here and mock these guys. It's to understand it. And then check what it tells us against the evidence. And the wonder doesn't leave when the gods do. I promise you that. It gets bigger. Because now you're standing in front of an actual mystery. Why anything exists at all. And you finally get to ask it honestly, without covering it with a name and pretending the name is an explanation. So when someone asks me, Derek, who created all of this? My answer is not nobody. My answer is, I don't know that it was created. And until the evidence points somewhere beyond our evolved intuitions and our inherited stories, I think an honest I don't know beats turning the mystery into a person. Let me know your thoughts. Have I gone too far? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you respect my conclusion even if you disagree with it and understand why I take that? I want to hear in the comment section. If you want a documentary made, email me. We are cooking documentaries for several different people. You can have your own idea, a book, a paper you wrote, an idea, a pet theory for someone else's ideas, someone historical, your own story. You'd be interested in telling your deconversion story or tell your own history in that regard. I'm open to all these ideas for documentaries as long as you're able to fund them. Look, share this with somebody who thinks the idea of God just fell out of the sky, okay? I'm Derek Lambert. This is Myth Vision. I hope you like, share, comment, subscribe, hype this thing if you're on your phone. Until next time, never forget, we are Myth Vision.
Okay, one more motherfucking game. God, that goddamn Holy Ghost shit fucking pisses me off. Get these goddamn underwear in my goddamn asshole. Jesus fucking Christ. Man, I'm not falling for that shit. Fucking dumbass. Oh no, hell no. Hell no, you ain't gonna do that shit. God damn it. God damn it. God fucking damn it. God damn it. God damn it. God fucking damn it. God damn it. God damn it. Stupid! Stupid shit. At least I dicked up one of those poems. God damn it. That fucking pisses me off.